Hello, I'm Michael. Anybody who showed up to the DBT meetup, I think in August or late July, I was the one who hosted that. I'm a senior analytics engineer at software.com, and my presentation today is the mental health journey of a data professional. So just as a disclaimer, I am not a mental health professional. This is my own subjective experience. The purpose today is I was hoping to document my journey and hope that people can find something that they can relate to, share some things that have worked for me in managing my own mental health care, and also acknowledging that with the pandemic the last few years and the current political climate, that there seems to be a lot of dread in the air. And searching for a therapist recently, it was very hard to find one that was accepting clients. So it seems like there's a high need right now for mental health care support. What are the things that I deal with and have dealt with in my life? Anxiety is the thing that's most present, particularly generalized anxiety and social anxiety. That tends to manifest in things like a racing mind when I'm trying to sleep at night, butterflies in my stomach when I'm trying to do something new or different that I haven't done before, or feeling uncomfortable in group settings where there's a large amount of people or giving presentations online in front of strangers. I also deal with depression. Depression for me is not a sadness, it's a lack of joy in doing things. I like to analogize depression for me as like a fog, and it sneaks up on me. And then when I find myself in the fog, it can be hard to find my way out. It can be hard to even realize how long I've been in the fog. And then another thing that's often connected to anxiety, depression for people is perfectionism. That's a term that people like to throw around casually, like OCD. And if people do that, that's not something that offends me. But for people who really suffer from perfectionism, it really can be very debilitating. And I like to talk about it in terms of it being a cycle of self-criticism. So for instance, if I'm trying to work on a project and I put it off and then I end up maybe not doing it, then I start criticizing myself. It makes it harder to do things going forward. Next, I'd like to talk just real briefly kind of about my personal history with the mental health issues that I have been dealing with and some of the big milestones in my life in regards to that. Now, I don't know exactly why I have the issues that I have. One thing I point to is my parents splitting up when I was young. I was about 11. That's obviously a very pivotal time in a child's life. You're entering middle school, you're about to hit puberty. There's probably also likely something genetic passed down from either one or both sides of my family. In middle school and high school, I wasn't really aware of the issues. And to give an example, that when I was a junior in high school, the school psychologist came and pulled me out of class once. One of your teachers is kind of concerned about you and he wanted me to check and just wanted to see how you're doing. And at the time, I was kind of flabbergasted and confused. I'm like, I'm fine. I'm okay. I don't really know what you're doing. And in retrospect, the class he took me out of, the teacher's name was Mr. Wilm. And Mr. Wilm was also one of the soccer coaches for the school. And I played soccer for a couple of years. And so he had a pretty good relationship with me. Looking back as you get older and you kind of like look back at certain things in your life, you realize I'm pretty sure it was him. It was his class. So it would make sense that he would be pulling me out of that class. By which in retrospect that I had kind of recognized some of the things that I was dealing with at the time and been able to reach out and accept that support. As I got into my early 20s, I started to recognize a little bit of these issues. I started to recognize that the anxiety I felt was more intense and more frequent than is typical, but I didn't really have the resources to take care of them. So I didn't make a lot of money, didn't always have health insurance. And most importantly, I didn't really know where or how to find a therapist. That wound up kind of peaking in the most difficult time of my life when I was about 26. I ended up having to move back in with my dad for about 6 months and isolated from my friends. I was out in the suburbs, was working a couple odd jobs. Fortunately, didn't have to pay rent, so I was able to save some money up, but didn't really know where I was going or what I was doing. And I remember very specifically staying up some nights in my room, watching TV, trying to go to sleep, and just having this pit of terror in my stomach, not being able to keep my thoughts from racing away from me. Fortunately, a friend of mine was able to get me a job that allowed me to move out of my dad's house. I met the woman who's now my wife on a road trip to visit her family about 6 months into our relationship. I actually broke down mid-ride, and it was the first time in my life that I ever admitted to someone that I think I have mental health issues that I need to actually address and take care of properly. With her support and encouragement, I found my first therapist. She confirmed the sort of sneaking suspicions I had that I was dealing with anxiety and depression. I would go on to see other therapists through the years, and my wife and I actually saw a couples therapist who kind of saved our relationship about 2 years in. And about 3 or 4 years ago, we started seeing that same therapist again after we got married, not because anything was wrong in our relationship, but being married and knowing that we wanted to start a family and make some big changes in our lives, just having her around to help support getting us through those big life milestones. After I went to my first therapist, I went back to school. I had not gone to college out of high school, so I was about 27, 28. A year or two into that, I had a weird health issue where I had this unexplained feeling in my stomach that was very uncomfortable, but not like painful, but it was worth getting checked out. The doctor I saw couldn't find anything wrong with me, but when I told her how anxious I was feeling about it, she decided to offer to put me onto medication. So I started taking citalopram, which is the generic version of Lexapro. And that's something that I've been taking every day since then. And it's done a great job of limiting the severity and intensity of the anxiety that I typically deal with. Mental health is a never-ending journey. I'm actually currently in a down phase. My wife and I got great news earlier this year. We're expecting our first child in February. But in August, we had an ultrasound done that showed a concerning measurement that gave us an elevated risk of having a chromosome issue with the pregnancy. Fortunately, everything's good. We did all the follow-up tests and we've been able to rule everything out, but it really forced me into some bad habits that I had tried to work myself out of. And it wasn't until the last couple of weeks actually that I was able to recognize that I'm in a sort of depressive phase, actually in the market for a new therapist. So what are some things that have historically worked for me? This is not going to be necessarily an exhaustive list, and it's certainly not going to be one size fits all for everybody. So, hopefully if you are dealing with mental health issues or know someone that is, you can take a piece of this and use it on your own. First thing is, there's the big three: therapy, medication, and physical wellness. Like I said, I've seen a few different therapists over the years, had varying degrees of connections with the three of them. One thing I have found is each therapist has their own personality and their own techniques and approaches that they like to use. And it's important to figure out what you need and what works for you. And it can be difficult at times, whether it's a new therapist that you're not working well with, or whether it's someone you've been seeing for a while, to kind of make that decision, just like a romantic relationship, to break up. But it's important because you have to be able to advocate for yourself, and you have to be able to find out what works for you. That may change over time, and you may need to see a new therapist, or you may start seeing a therapist and it just doesn't click and you need to move on. Again, with medication, I was very fortunate. I kind of got medicated right on the first try. The medication and the dose that I received has worked well for me. Talking to other people, that's not always typical. A lot of people go through a real difficult trial and error period where they try different medications or different combinations of medications, or also adjusting the dose of their medication. So medication is something that you see in your future, or if a therapist, a psychiatrist recommends for you, be prepared that it may not be as simple, and it may be difficult. A lot of people have a very difficult time with the side effects of certain medications. And then obviously with physical wellness, that's an important part of being mentally fit. I used to be a lot more active when I was younger. I played soccer and baseball and other sports. I used to ride my bike a lot. As I've gotten into my 30s, I've been a lot more sedentary. Fortunately for me, I've been doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu for the last 15 years. That is something that has really helped me stay active as I get older. It's an intellectually stimulating activity, and it also has a really good social component. So there's always a good reason to go into the gym. And, if you're like me, you don't like to just go to the gym or even have a home gym and just lift weights. And it can be kind of hard to motivate yourself to do that. But when you have something that you really love, it can really help a lot in that regard. It's also just not about physical activity. Being mindful of your diet, being mindful that you're both getting enough sleep and enough quality sleep to prepare you for the day. A couple other things that have worked for me are meditation and journaling. I try to meditate every day for 10 to 20 minutes. Lately, I've actually fallen off that habit. It's been about 3 weeks since I've been in a good routine. I personally like to use a guided meditation app that helps kind of keep me regimented in that. And then I've also started keeping a habit journal over the last year. And that's something that I really found helpful. My habit journal has 3 different sections. At the start, or in the first section, it's one line each day. And each month usually has a different topic. So something like just write something down that you feel gratitude for, or just write something about your day. And then I also have a section for day, week, month planning. I keep track of all the meetings I have during a day, all the things I want to get done, and that sort of bubbles up to the week and the month level. And then I have a habit tracker at the end. I track things like, am I doing my morning and evening routines in terms of brushing my teeth and flossing and taking my medication? I keep track of my blood pressure and my weight, and I don't do anything fancy with it. I don't throw it into Excel or anything fancy like that. Just having that as part of my routine to do that every day, and just at a glance, I can kind of check on myself and see, I haven't been meditating for 3 weeks. Maybe that's why I'm not feeling so great. So one other thing I find helpful for myself is to be honest with myself and with others. So I very often will kind of get in my own head and try to put on an outward face that everything's okay. And sometimes I get stuck there. It's only once I externalize it, whether it's talking to my wife or talking to a therapist or talking to a close friend, that it kind of frees me and it kind of takes a weight off my shoulders. And one thing I also recommend too is, examine your habits and try to tease out the negative ones in your life. One thing I've been dealing with over the last 2 or 3 years is really wrestling with how to use social media in a way that doesn't become a negative in my life. This month, I actually quit Facebook. I don't think I'll ever go back, given all the things that have been coming out lately with the whistleblower reports. But I'm also wrestling with things like Twitter and Reddit and weighing the value that I get from them with sort of the mindless scrolling that comes with that and the stress and anxiety that can accompany that. In the workplace, one thing that I have a hard time with is just starting on a project. So get a new project can be this really massive, overwhelming ordeal. So obviously one thing that you really should be doing anyway is breaking stuff into smaller chunks. But one thing I try to do for myself is just to give myself the freedom to start doing something poorly, just to get myself starting to work on it and giving myself the freedom of like, hey, it's okay because you're going to iterate on it later and it's going to get to the point where you want it. If you work at a place that has a very generous vacation policy, really utilize that time, take as much time as you can, disconnect when you do, get off Slack, get off your email. If you really need someone to be able to get in contact with you, give your number to your manager or supervisor or just one person in your team. Someone that you trust will only reach out if it's absolutely necessary. Try to take breaks during your day, going for walks, reading, doing things that aren't in front of a screen that can put your mind at ease. And then if you have comfort doing this, one thing I try to do, not for myself necessarily, but for hopefully for others, is I try to normalize mental health care in the places I work. I have no problem putting on my calendar, if I have a therapy session during the day, I have no problem putting that on my calendar for people to see. I'll drop it in a stand-up if I'm going to be out, like, hey, between 1 and 2, I'm going to be out at a therapy session. I don't try to make a big deal of it, but just kind of normalize it so other people, if they're also dealing with that and don't feel as comfortable, maybe can feel more comfortable with it. And then if you have a manager or supervisor that you feel comfortable with, be open with them about what you're going through. So if you're having a mental health issue, bring it up to them. If you have something like a death in the family or some other event that is going to potentially cause you to take time off, get ahead of it. I've been very fortunate to have managers where I feel comfortable doing that. Obviously, if you don't want to open up and have someone kind of shut you down, so try to be mindful of that. But if that's the case, from the jobs channel on Slack, it's very clear that the market's very hot right now. So if you're in a position where your mental health is not being supported, it may be worth reaching out to other opportunities. And then finally, this is kind of related to the work component. Sometimes for me, when I'm at my very lowest and I recognize it, I just find myself needing to kind of force myself to take a step in the right direction. Even if that step is as silly as taking the trash out just to leave the house, just to give me something that I can look at and say, hey, I did something today. And tomorrow I can do a little bit more. And tomorrow, the day after that, I can do a little bit more. So before I go, here's some useful resources. I can post these in the channel. The 2 I wanted to point out, though, are at the top. If you're looking for a therapist, Psychology Today has a really great tool that you can use to search for therapists by your zip code and also by the issues that you may be dealing with and your insurance. And if you're in school or if you know someone in school that is needing mental health care, a lot of universities have counseling centers, and you also typically get free sessions. So it's a resource that I definitely took advantage of when I was in school, and I would recommend others do it as well. So thank you very much for listening. If you want to reach out, I'm Michael Fagan on the DBT Slack. You can also reach me at Gmail and LinkedIn. Thank you.
You'll notice in a moment on Slack that there has been a lot of positive responses to your talk, and I'm just incredibly thankful that you felt comfortable and opened up about your journey. You'll see that many of us can relate to things that you shared, and it's just really brave for you to share and create this safe space where others also feel comfortable sharing. So thank you. And I am so glad that we were able to have you today. I do want to open it up to the group to see if there are any other questions for Michael or just comments.
Just really made my day to hear this. I struggle with pretty much the same issues. Also, similarly, have been kind of in a depressive phase lately. So it's just nice to hear that today. It actually brings me up a lot. So thanks, Michael.
Thank you. So Emily asked a question. Do you have some go-to strategies like a first aid kit that you use if you need to stabilize quickly? Honestly, I think the one thing that I mentioned during the presentation was just externalizing it. My wife and I had a therapy session today. It's been a couple of months since my wife and I got the news that we might have an issue with our pregnancy. And it was very much of the mindset of, I have to be stoic and solid because she's the pregnant one. She's going to have to deal with if we have to terminate or if something goes wrong. And so I kind of put my own feelings aside to kind of get us through that. And we had a moment today where I was able to kind of get some of that out, and being able to have someone I can talk to and just get it out of my head. That's really the biggest thing for me.
I was just going to say, first of all, a very brave talk and thanks for sharing it. A lot of things I can relate to there as well. But Michael in passing mentioned perfectionism, which I think is a really important one in the workplace, because it's something I had a hard time understanding personally, that it's not just liking things to be well done. If things are not literally perfect, that something like terrible will happen. And that can lead to you spending an hour writing a trivial email, like that can lead to you not being able to sleep because, oh my God, what if this cell in the spreadsheet is wrong? What if this test isn't right? And that's something that I was just like, oh, I'm a hard worker. And then someone was like, maybe it shouldn't take you 18 hours to write an email that's 3 lines long.
This is a video that I listed here, why perfectionists become depressed. I don't even remember how I stumbled upon that. I remember the first time I watched it, I cried afterwards because it was the first time I heard someone express perfectionism was like in my head. And it really is that cycle. And it can be really weird too, where even times where I complete a project or do something well, where you don't even give yourself the credit because you start making excuses for yourself, like anybody could do this, or someone could do this faster than me. And so you never really give yourself that credit. I am capable, I can do this, and I put a lot of work into it.
I could just keep going and continuing to talk about this, because I think the more we talk about it, the more comfortable we get, the better we get at coping with these sorts of situations. And so just once again, huge thank you for being so candid with us, and also just providing some very useful resources, information on your coping strategies. I definitely took some notes, and we'll definitely have some meditating going on this evening. So thank you.